Hi, my name is Matt Wilbanks. I am Chief Marketing Officer at securitygate.io, and I'll be hosting the Ask Me Anything event that you're about to listen to. I would love to hear your feedback. I would love to know if the topic is helpful for you and any suggestions you have for how we can make this better. So email me directly. My email is matt, M-A-T-T, at securitygate.io. Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'd like to welcome you to the first one of our live Ask Me Anything sessions. Thanks for joining again. Um, as mentioned, this is the first time we're doing this, so we're trying out a whole bunch of different things. We'll take the best from this and move forward with them and figure out the things that don't work and adjust from there. Um, so what we thought we'd do first off is just kind of give a little introduction so you know who you're watching or who you're listening to. Um, why don't we start, Mick? Why don't we start with you? You want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little about your background.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mick Vaughn. I am a SME with SecurityGate. Part of my responsibility with SecurityGate presently is to learn to ingest the platform to know everything I can know about it. Also to help guided assessments for our clients. Also, one of the very interesting duties is to, on a daily basis, uh, I share the duties of watching the security posture of our organization from our IT standpoint. My background, I was with another company where one of the co-worker or co-founders and I actually were co-workers, and we did assessments with spreadsheets. And the co-founders came up with a way to do this using this platform, which is really amazing, highly scalable, and it just does a lot of the things that we used to do with spreadsheets. It just does them in an automated fashion.
Awesome. And we also have Brent here. Brent, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Brent Gage. Honestly, the Mick gave, there's no, I don't want to just repeat everything you said. We're basically serving the same role at the company. Um, yeah, we're pretty much his entire intro. I also worked with one of the founders and Mick at a previous company.
We share a brain cell.
Nice. Well, it's great to have you guys joining in with us for this. You know, we were talking weeks ago about um, how we can kind of pool more of the engineering talent and experience that we have around cybersecurity from everybody's background, um, and use that to help our customers, other people who reach out to us for advice. And one of the things that we talked about doing was creating a knowledge base of content that could be searchable, that could be watchable, listenable. Is that a word? We wanted to be able to take from our experience and from the things that we learned from our customers and be able to give back to the community. And so this this recording is an example of that. We wanted to start off with something that we thought might resonate for people who are getting their cybersecurity risk management programs either off the ground or from a point where they are right now to growing it maybe a little bit bigger. Um, and so what we did is we put together this blog post of the first three or the top three things to focus on when you're getting your cybersecurity program going. And the idea behind this event today was not to take up a whole bunch of time. It was to carve out 20 minutes and let's have a conversation about this topic. Um, so that's what we're going to do. If you are joining us, if you're watching this later, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you can go to securitygate.io, find our blog, and you'll see the post right there. So, guys, why don't we go ahead and jump into this? So, as we were talking about this topic before, when we were putting the blog post together, the question was, what are the top three or the first three things that anyone should focus on when they're getting their program going. Um, and you guys very quickly came back without much hesitation and said it was buy-in, baseline, and budget. Um, so let's just take these one at a time and kind of talk through them. Um, whoever wants to take this, what tell us about buy-in? What is buy-in? Can we define that a little bit? Brent, I think you're on
Months.
mute.
Okay,
Hang
so
on.
buy-in. This is where you have
There
manager
we go.
support or C-suite support for the program. Without that support, without breaking through what actually might be silos and having oversight and governance, you're not going to get anywhere. Your program's not going to go very far. So buy-in is extremely important.
Yeah, I'd like to add. There's a couple reasons you need buy-in. A big one is just when you hit the next step. Honestly, it can be very difficult to get everybody to sit down to answer the questions you need to baseline your area without the buy-in. You have to have uh, top down leadership promote, endorse, and make it a priority for their employees. Without which it's almost impossible to gather all the information. And then once you continue the process, there's things that require participation as well. Many different steps in the process require getting people set down in a meeting room and discussing things because a lot of it's a judgment call when you're managing risk. And without the stakeholders involved, you can't make a judgment.
Yeah. How do you figure out who do you need to get buy-in from?
It's got to be upper management. And really, it depends on the organizational structure of the company. Typically, you're going to want a CTO, CISO, someone C-suite level. For a larger organization, a smaller organization, you're going to need the CEO.
Mhm.
You're also going to need to involve whoever the risk rolls up to. That is the person or persons or organizations that drive things. If the risk rolls up to them, they're going to want to understand their risk posture throughout the organization, and that's where the impetus to actually get things done it stems from.
So part of the way maybe that you might come across or might figure out who owns that risk or that specific control or something that you're working on is probably by doing some sort of a baseline assessment. Would that be correct? Is there another way that you guys have used or talked to other people about figuring out who do you get support from, who do you get buy-in from?
Or are you saying you need to run the assessment to find out who you get buy-in from?
Well, yeah. So I guess the question is if this was a new program and aside from getting some leadership influence to help drive the program forward, um, understanding who else you might need to go to in order to get their support for answering assessment questions or things like that. Um, would you go through kind of a mini assessment process to figure out, oh yeah, these are the teams that I need to go get buy-in from, so that when we're running a full assessment, they're bought in. They're
Kind of. It's really more important for the next phase because once you identify the gap, yeah. So yeah, at the first part, you're just going to ask upper management what areas of responsibility, who would know about this, who would know about that, and you might learn more from employees. But typically, when you're looking for once you do once you do the baseline, then you know exactly who you need to involve and who are the stakeholders in making the change.
You know something too. One of the older frameworks that people kind of overlook is the ITIL framework. That informs a lot of decisions. ITIL pretty much targets who holds what controls. So don't forget about the old ITIL frameworks. They actually do have a place still.
So talking about frameworks actually is a good segue into the next segment of the topic. So the first thing that you should focus on is buy-in. The second is baseline. What is baseline? when you guys wrote back real quick and said baseline is one of the things that they should focus on, what did you mean by that?
Well, I mean, that's just finding exactly where you're at, what your security posture is. It's figuring out what controls you have, what controls you need, who owns responsibility. From that, you can determine how you remediate. But you have to know where you are before you figure out where you're going.
If I might add, it's your situational awareness. It's
Mm,
knowing the state of your organization, of your information system, because you're actually assessing a number of things. So it's the situational awareness, knowing what state either your organization or your information system is in that you're assessing.
and to understand that, to understand the state of where everything is at today, you mentioned a second ago, Mick, that the ITIL framework is a good one that has been used a lot for doing this type of thing. How do you figure out what is the right framework for your company?
So you have statutory and regulatory drivers that could very well tell you exactly what framework to go to. If you are maritime, there are specific drivers for those types of engagements and assessments. So again, um, knowing what the statutory and possibly regulatory drivers are, that will point you in pretty much the right direction. I'll say 60%. The other 40%, you're going to need to understand what it is that you actually intend to accomplish. So, what's
Hmm.
the end game?
And the end game, that could be compliance to some standard, a client standard, a regulatory
Absolutely.
body.
Absolutely. So you have Bessie for drilling ships. Bessie tells the drill ships what to do. You have something called the WSOG, which is the Well Specific Operating Guidelines. These things tell you that here's where your assessment path lies, because this
Yeah.
is your well specific operating guidelines. So you take all those things; those are your regulatory and statutory drivers, and they push you towards basically what type of assessment. So you might want to do a DFARS, you might want to do um, whatever maritime BIMCO. There's a number, and we have these out of the box.
So there are a lot of frameworks that are very industry specific. There are also frameworks that are much more generalized. Um, IT frameworks that could be used across lots of industries. Presumably, those more generalized frameworks that you could use across many different industries have questions in them that might not apply to your business. Do you have to use all the questions? How do you go about using a framework that's much more general?
Or you'd have to take assumption and risk. So there's certain areas if it does not apply to the company and it's not something you need to control for, you get upper management to sign off say you've accepted this risk. Now there's certain area if you're in certain areas, regulatory bodies or clients usually accept that. Regulatory bodies might. It depends on the regulatory body. But typically, if you're under a regulatory body, most of those controls that they're asking for are going to apply to you.
Yeah. You mentioned something else about accepted risks there. So that they're, unless you're working towards an assessment that says you have to be in compliant with these three things, um, there may be some risks that as a business you decide that we're just going to accept this for now and move forward.
Absolutely.
Um, how when you guys are talking to our customers, when you've worked with people in the past about reviewing the risk that they found through an assessment, how 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 do you advise that they make a decision about whether or not to accept a risk and move forward or not?
Well, cybersecurity risk management is a lot like any other kind of risk management. There are areas you look at probability, you look at how impactful it could be to the company, These factor, it's going to be at the end of the day a judgment call, which is why it's up to upper management to make the decision. But we can provide our expertise in the probability and the amount of impact it would have after you have to baseline first though before you can provide that information. Without the baseline, it's very difficult to get that information. There's something we've incorporated in a program called a risk registry. It kind of formalizes the process and automates it for upper management. It really honestly depends. At the end of the day, it's a business. So if it impacts your bottom, if it's too expensive to enact, you can't do it. Too many man or too many resources, and the probability is low enough that you've accepted it, I would recommend writing it off. Of course, once again, this does not work for regulatory bodies necessarily.
Right. Makes sense.
So
So,
we always included when we did that analysis on risk, a risk matrix, which basically it goes in two directions on two different there's a vertical horizon and there's the horizontal, and your risk basically looks, it goes green from one end to red on the other end, and again, like Brent was saying, it's based on, okay, so how likely is this risk to materialize? You got to kind of come up with that, and I know these things are kind of hard to quantify, and it ends up being a chart, like he says, it's very subjective, but you have to start somewhere. But you have to have an idea of what an organization's appetite for risk is. If they have a high appetite for risk, they may let things slide. That's
mhm.
good. If they have a low appetite for risk, it's going to be very, very costly for that type of organization to mature. So you have to find a happy medium. And you're probably going to have to do a really what looks like a simple risk matrix, and trying to kind of go from there.
It can be kind of a difficult process because there's, you have to have a good understanding of um, the severity of these risks in and of themselves, but then you also have to take in the context of the business and how it's operating and what's a priority for the business right now, so that you can then determine, okay, the severity of this risk in this context is really not that big of a deal to us right now. But this other thing that might not be a big risk for another company is a big deal to us right now. Um, these types of conversations, some of these are where our own company was founded out of, is spreadsheets of data and matrices and trying to understand these things and make judgments about what to do, um, led to the genesis of security gate and automating some of these things and uh, making the process a little bit easier. we
Exactly.
won't get into a uh, we won't get into a sales pitch about security gate, but just interesting that understanding how difficult these conversations can be.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to mention though, this is another place where buy-in is critical. You need everybody involved in the systems that are going to be affected. Everybody that works with these systems, they're going to know more about the system's functionality than the C-suite management. So
Yeah,
they need to be told this priority. Threat risk matrix is a very big area where buy-in is critical.
makes sense. Well, let's see. We've gone through buy-in, and then we just talked about baseline, understanding where we are with the state of things right now. Um, let's go to the third item, which is budget. Um, Man, budget is a conversation for everyone right now. It seems like no matter what industry you're in, uh, times are challenging, and budgets are being cut all over the place, and everyone being asked to do more with less, and um, this type of environment probably will continue for some time. So the budget conversation is a good one to have. Um, so as the third of the top three things to focus on when you're building your cybersecurity program, how do you figure out how much budget you need? How do you come to those answers?
Well, I mean, that's the baseline. That's what the baseline is for. Combination of the baseline and the threat risk matrix is where you determine how much money you need. You find out how much money they're willing to spend on their security, and you prioritize the things based on their risk tolerance. And occasionally, those two things may not meet up, in which case decisions have to be made. Ideally, you'd be able to spend as much as you need to get it secure. Right? That's what all cybersecurity engineers dream of. But it's not. It's not. It doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
All a matter of balancing your priorities. But I would say always shoot, just like time, always shoot for 20% more than you think you need, because you'll probably end up needing
So when we had talked previously about how going through that first full baseline assessment, and then using that information is really how you come up with the budget that you want to operate on and start prioritizing decisions about what controls to focus on. And but oftentimes in order to run that initial baseline assessment, you've got to have some type of budget just to be able to do that assessment. So we find ourselves in a little bit of a chicken and egg situation of I need a budget to figure out what budget I have, what I can get. I need a budget to be able to do that assessment. Is it reasonable to think in most situations that if this is a new program and you've been hired on to do this job, that there is some expectation of some budget that is built in for you to get off the ground and get started? Is that a reasonable expectation? Um, how do you guys counsel people that are, just maybe it's a one person risk management program and they're trying to get things off the ground? How do you talk to them about this? Where do they start?
Well, typically if you've got proper buy-in, they will release initial budget for things like that. If you have enough expertise specifically in the field you're in, specifically with the conditions they're in, you might be able to estimate. You would know what questions to ask, and you'd be able to create a gap analysis from that. Unfortunately, they're so wide ranging, so many different frameworks, so many different industries, and everybody needs this stuff.
Yeah.
And not to mention there's kind of a dearth in the market for people that are qualified to do so. So the issue becomes really how fast can you read? If you have no budget done, you need to get online, figure out which frameworks you should use, find out if somebody's written questions for the controls. If not, you're going to have to write your own, and then do the assessment internally using spreadsheets and individual meetings. Now, ideally, in terms of commercial, but ideally, if you can free up just a little bit, we've automated a lot of that process.
Yeah, I mean that's why we're here to help with this stuff. And whether or not you're interested in security gate software, if you have questions about where to get started, of course we're always able to take phone calls and help people out. We've been doing these things for a long time. Okay, so we've talked about getting buy-in, running your baseline assessment, and then figuring out what your budget should be, so that you can run the program. After that, it's really kind of up to you to go work with your leadership team and figure out what to prioritize on and what those things are going to cost. Would you advise on any next steps after that? What does the process typically look like for a program after you get beyond these three steps?
Well, then you gotta prioritize and create a POAM. You need to figure out exactly how long it's going to take to fix something, who will be involved in it, and what they need to do. And then you need to stick with your program.
What does that acronym stand for, Brent?
Oh man, put me on the spot with acronyms.
Plan of action.
Plan of action and milestones, I believe.
There you go. Plan of action and milestones. And something that occurred to me as I was reading through this was that these three things to focus on for a new program might be a great place to start, but it almost seems like these three things kind of never go away. Even after your baseline assessment, that if you're working on making improvements, you're going through remediation processes, you've hit your compliance checklist. Next year, you're kind of at the starting point again of
Absolutely.
You're constantly in a, who do I need to get buy-in from so that I can focus on this next control? What is it going to take to get those controls in place? Are those even the ones that we should be focused on? How much is that going to cost? It's kind of a cycle that just keeps going.
You kind of answered your question. It's communication. So you got to communicate because, like you said, none of these things are going to go away. It's going to keep coming again. It's cyclical. So if you don't have good communication and you find yourself blindsided, your program is going to go away. But if you
Yeah.
have good communication throughout the organization, um, you shouldn't have too many blindsided events. You're going to have events that might surprise you, but they're not going to catch you completely unaware.
Good communication seems like right at the center of just about every challenge that you have in business. All about communication.
Pretty much.
Well, we are up against the clock here. We promised that we wouldn't keep everybody for too long, that this could be a short, manageable event here so that you're not stretching your attention span and it can just be a quick jump in and get some knowledge and go. Any last final words? Anything that that you guys want to leave our audience with today?
Just that I know there were probably some questions popped in you had earlier we didn't get to. Anybody that's got individual questions, we will work our best to send you some emails. Come up with anything you didn't think to ask before this, shoot us an email. We'll see what we can do.
Definitely visit us online at securitygate.io. Feel free to drop us a question anytime. We're always happy to help. Thanks, guys. This was fun. We'll be announcing the next one soon, and in the meantime, stay in touch. We'll see y'all later. Thanks for joining.
Have a good day.